A 91-year-old man placed a statue of the Virgin Mary inside a worn backpack and began walking 31 miles alone. No one understood why he would do something like that. But what started with a single step would become something no one could explain. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to see just how far these stories travel. Walter was 91 years old. He lived alone in a small, quiet house tucked away in rural Pennsylvania. Every morning, without fail, he woke up at 5 a.m. Not because he wanted to. His body simply wouldn't allow him to sleep any longer. Slowly, carefully, he would sit up, place his feet on the cold floor, and make his way to the kitchen. Coffee came first. Always coffee. His routine never changed. You know the type, right? The kind of person who lives their life in the same rhythm every single day, as if time itself had settled into a pattern around them. Walter had spent 43 years working in steel. His hands had shaped metal, carried weight, endured heat most people couldn't stand for even a minute. Now those same hands trembled just holding a cup. But he never complained. Not once. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 6 years earlier. And when she did, something inside that house went silent. Margaret had been everything Walter was not. She talked easily, laughed loudly, filled the house with life. She would invite neighbors over without warning, cook too much food, and make sure no one ever left hungry. Walter had always been quieter, steady, reserved. But without Margaret, the silence became real. She had been deeply devoted to her faith. On the shelf in the living room sat a statue of the Virgin Mary, a wedding gift they had received decades earlier. Margaret prayed there often. Walter would pass by, sometimes catching a glimpse of her, eyes closed, lips moving softly. He never interrupted, never asked questions. He just kept walking. He believed in his own way, but not like her. Still, after she was gone, he kept the statue clean. Every week, he dusted it. Not because of what it was, but because it had been hers. Have you ever done that? Taken care of something, not for its value, but for the person it reminds you of? Walter had 3 children. Robert, the oldest, lived in Ohio and called once a month. Diane lived about 40 minutes away and visited when she could. Thomas, the youngest, showed up once a year, usually at Christmas. They all had their lives, their responsibilities. Walter never complained about that either. But there was one person who came often. Ethan, Diane's son, 17 years old, tall, quiet, with dark hair and a calm presence that matched his grandfather's. He visited at least twice a week, sometimes more. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They would sit on the porch together, watching the yard. Sometimes Ethan would do homework at the kitchen table while Walter watched television. Other times, they'd sit side by side during a game, barely speaking. But there was something between them. Something steady. Something real. Ethan was the closest person Walter had. One Tuesday in October, Diane called. Her voice wasn't broken, but it was tight. Controlled. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Walter listened. "It's about Ethan," she said. "He had some tests done. The doctor wants more. The results, they weren't good." Walter said nothing. 10 seconds passed. To Diane, it felt like 10 minutes. "How is he?" Walter finally asked. "He's okay for now, but they want to monitor him closely." Walter ended the call. He placed the phone down slowly. Then, without thinking, his eyes moved to the statue on the shelf. He sat at the kitchen table and stayed there until night fell. You know that feeling? When something hits you and you don't react right away. That's exactly where Walter was. Still on the outside, but inside something had started moving. Over the next few days, Walter grew even quieter. When Ethan came by later that week, Walter watched him closely. Not in an obvious way, just small glances. Subtle, careful. Ethan didn't know anything yet. Diane had made sure of that. "I don't want him worrying," she had said. Walter agreed. But knowing something like that and saying nothing, it weighs on you. The following week, Walter did something he had never done before. He stood in front of the statue, alone, and he prayed. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't practiced. It was simple, direct, almost uncomfortable. He didn't know the words, but he said them anyway. And then he made a decision. A decision no one expected. Walter was going to take Margaret's statue and walk it to the shrine she had once visited. 31 miles away, on foot. He remembered the way she talked about that place, the way her eyes lit up, the way she described it as if it was more than just a location. She had only been there once, but she never forgot it. Neither did he. So Walter decided he would take the statue there himself. Not by car, not with help, on foot. A promise, a request, an offering. For Ethan. To anyone else, it sounded impossible. A 91-year-old man, with aching knees and trembling hands, walking 31 miles carrying a statue? It didn't make sense. But to Walter it did. When he told Diane, she was shocked. "Dad, you can't do this." "I know," he said. "Then why?" Walter looked at her calmly. "Because it's what I have to do." They tried everything. Arguments. Logic. Concern. Nothing changed his mind. Walter had already decided. And once he did, there was no turning him. He prepared quietly. An old backpack from the closet. A bottle of water. 2 packs of crackers. A jacket. And the statue, carefully wrapped in cloth. It wasn't heavy for most people. But for him it was. Still, he packed it anyway. He chose Monday. For maybe 5 days of walking. Slow. Steady. No rush. Just direction. The night before he left, Ethan came by. They sat on the porch like always. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Ethan asked. "I'm fine," Walter replied. "You've been different." "I'm the same." Ethan studied him for a moment, then let it go. They sat in silence until it was time to leave. At 4:30 in the morning, Walter woke up. Coffee. Backpack. Keys. He locked the door behind him and stepped into the cold. It was still dark. That kind of October cold that slips through your clothes and settles into your bones. His legs hurt before the first mile was done, but he didn't stop. One step, then another. The road stretched ahead of him. Dirt paths, broken asphalt, quiet farmland on both sides. No highways, no noise, just open land and distance. By sunrise, the world softened. Light spread across the fields. The air warmed just enough. Walter stopped at an abandoned gas station and sat down on a cracked concrete block. 20 minutes. Water. Silence. His feet already burned inside his boots. His knees protested. But he stood up again. Around noon, he ate under a tree. Crackers. Water. Half the bottle gone. He would need more. That first day, Walter walked 5 miles. By the time he stopped, the sun was already dropping. The air turned cold again. He found a tree near a fence line, set his backpack down, leaned against it, and sat there, breathing slowly. The journey had only begun, and his body had no idea what was still ahead. When Walter finally took off his boots that first night, he noticed the damage had already begun. A blister had formed on his right heel. Small, but enough to warn him. Tomorrow would be worse. He ate slowly, a few crackers, the last of his water, then leaned back against his backpack and closed his eyes. The only sound around him was the steady rhythm of crickets. Imagine that for a second. A 91-year-old man, alone by the side of a quiet road, sleeping upright, with a statue of the Virgin Mary in his bag. The second day was different. The second day, his body understood. Walter woke up stiff, locked in pain. His knees were swollen. His back throbbed with every movement. Even standing up required effort. Every step became a negotiation. Pain on one side, will on the other. And somehow, he chose to keep moving. He walked slower now, much slower. Sometimes he stopped every few hundred yards just to breathe. Sometimes he leaned against a post, closed his eyes, and stayed there longer than he planned. The sky was gray that morning. The air heavy, damp, the kind of cold that doesn't sit on your skin, it settles deep inside your bones. That was the day people started noticing him. A pickup truck pulled over beside him. "Hey, you all right? Need a ride?" Walter didn't stop walking. "No, thank you." "You sure? You don't look so good." "I'm sure." The driver stared at him for a moment, then drove away. It happened again, and again, 3 more times that day. Different people. Same question. Same answer. Walter never explained himself. He just kept walking. By the end of the second day, he had covered 5 miles. Less than the first, but still moving forward. 13 miles in 2 days. Almost halfway. That night, he didn't find a tree. He found a bus stop. Empty. Cold. Silent. He sat on the bench, placed the backpack beside him, and pulled his jacket tighter around his body. The cold was sharper that night. It crept into his arms, into his chest, into his bones. At some point before dawn, something unexpected happened. Margaret came back to him, not as a memory he searched for, but as one that arrived on its own. Her kitchen, a winter morning. Soup simmering on the stove. Too much pepper, like always. Her voice humming softly as she cooked. And then, it was gone. The third day was the hardest. Walter tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. Dizziness hit him, forcing him to grab onto something. On the third attempt, he made it. Barely. Everything hurt. Not just his knees. Everything. Muscles. Joints. Even his breathing felt heavy. Every part of him was asking him to stop. But Walter walked. That day, the pace changed again. Each mile stretched longer. Each step demanded more. He stopped often, on rocks, on logs, on the edge of the road. Every pause felt longer than the last. By mid-afternoon, he couldn't go any further. Walter sat down on the dirt. Right there. No plan. No strength left. His legs refused to respond. His arms trembled. The backpack suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Not 4 pounds. 40. The sun beat down. His head spun. He closed his eyes. And for the first time, he thought about stopping. I can't. The words came out quietly, almost like a confession. Can you imagine that moment? Everything you've pushed through. And suddenly, nothing moves anymore. He sat there. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Time didn't matter anymore. And then, something changed. The scent came first. Roses. Strong. Fresh. Impossible. As if someone had placed a bouquet right beside him. Walter opened his eyes. Looked around. Nothing. Just an open field. A quiet road. No flowers. No explanation. But the scent was real. He took a deep breath. And something shifted inside him. The pain didn't disappear. But it softened. The exhaustion didn't leave. But it loosened its grip. His legs steadied. His head cleared. Walter stood up. Slowly. Carefully. But he stood. He picked up the backpack. Placed it on his shoulders. And began walking again. The scent followed him for a few steps. Then faded. But whatever it had done, remained. That day, he walked another 4. 5 miles. Miles that had seemed impossible just moments before. Total distance, 17. 5 miles. Only 13. 5 left. Far away, Diane was losing sleep. Walter had no phone. No way to reach him. No way to know where he was. She drove 2 different roads, hoping to find him. Nothing. She called Robert. I'm worried. He's stubborn, Robert said. You know that. What if something happens? Silence. Then, I don't know. That answer didn't help. By Wednesday morning, Diane made a decision. If Walter was going to the shrine, she would go there too. And wait. She called everyone. Robert. Thomas. Ethan. In the car, she finally told Ethan the truth. Your grandfather is doing this for you. Ethan stared out the window. Quiet. For a long time. He's doing all this for me? Yes. Ethan didn't say anything else. That same night, at a small gas station miles away, an employee noticed Walter sitting outside. He brought him water. Started a conversation. Where are you heading? The shrine. On foot. Yes. The man didn't argue. He just brought him more water. That moment, small as it seemed, changed everything. Because he told his wife. She told someone else. That person told others. And suddenly, the story began to spread. A 91-year-old man, walking miles, carrying a statue, for a reason no one understood. By the 4th day, Walter felt something new. Not strength, but certainty. His body still hurt. Every step still cost him something. But now, he believed he could finish. And that changed everything. After 31 miles, Walter finally reached the altar. He took the statue out of the backpack slowly, almost carefully, as if he were holding something alive. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he placed it in the center of the altar. Gently, deliberately, like someone saying goodbye to a friend. He kept his hands there for a second longer than necessary. Then let go. Silence filled the shrine. No one spoke. No one needed to. Diane stepped closer first. She took her father's arm carefully, as if he might break. Robert stood on the other side. Thomas behind them. For the first time in days, the entire family was together again. 5 days of worry. 5 days of not knowing where he was. 5 days of imagining the worst. And now, he was there. Walter didn't say anything. He simply stood in front of the statue and looked. He went home that same day, not walking, in Diane's car. When he arrived, he didn't even try to stay awake. He went to bed and slept 12 straight hours. The following days were harder, not emotionally, physically. His body collected everything it was owed. Every mile, every night on the ground, every step taken beyond what it should have allowed. Getting out of bed became a task. Walking across the room required effort. Even sitting down felt heavy. But Walter didn't complain. Not once. 3 weeks later, Ethan had his follow-up tests. No one talked about it directly, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Diane barely slept the night before. Robert called multiple times that morning. Thomas sent a message early. Let me know as soon as you hear anything. The house was quiet, but inside, everything was loud. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Diane called Walter. Her voice was different. Not tense. Not afraid. Something else. Dad, go ahead. Ethan's results came in. A pause. They improved. Walter didn't respond. The doctor said it's significant, Diane continued. He doesn't really understand why, but the improvement is real. Silence. Long, heavy. Dad, are you there? I'm here. His voice was calm. Normal. The same as always. But Diane knew. Behind that voice, something had shifted. You heard me, right? I heard. And then he hung up. Walter stood still for a moment. His hands trembled more than usual. He looked toward the shelf in the living room. Empty. The statue wasn't there anymore. It was at the shrine, exactly where he had left it. And for the first time, that emptiness didn't feel like loss. It felt right. Coincidence? Maybe. Treatment was already happening. Doctors were working. It could have improved anyway. Or maybe, a 91-year-old man walked 31 miles, carrying something more than just a statue. And something answered. Months passed. Ethan kept going to tests. Each one, better than the last. Doctors called it unexpected progress. Used complicated words. Adjustments. Monitoring. Protocols. The family didn't understand the terms, but they understood the outcome. Ethan got better. Life slowly returned to normal, but not the same normal. Ethan started visiting his grandfather again, twice a week, just like before. Porch. Homework. Games on TV. Silence. Presence. But something had changed. The family came closer. Robert started calling every week, not once a month. Thomas visited during Easter, not just Christmas. Diane stopped by almost every day, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Walter stayed the same. Still woke up at 5. Still made coffee in silence. Still sat on the porch in his old chair. But if you looked carefully, there was something new. A lightness. One Sunday afternoon, months later, Ethan sat beside him on the porch. The sun was low. Everything bathed in warm, golden light. Grandpa. Walter nodded slightly. Mom told me everything. Walter didn't react. The chair creaked softly as it rocked. 31 miles. Ethan said quietly. For me. Walter looked ahead, then answered, as if it meant nothing extraordinary. Yeah. Ethan swallowed. Thank you, Grandpa. Walter shook his head slightly. You don't thank for that. Because some things don't come from logic. They don't come from reason. They don't come from calculation. They come from love. And sometimes, love looks like a 91-year-old man, walking 31 miles, on broken roads, with something sacred on his back. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. You know what happened to the people who walked with Walter? Not all of them, but some. The couple who gave him food, they started going to church again. Not because they planned to, because something inside them shifted. The man who walked beside him for a while, that same night, he called his mother, for the first time in months. Nothing dramatic. No big speeches. Just small changes. And sometimes, those are the biggest ones. One Saturday morning, Ethan arrived with something wrapped in paper. He placed it on the kitchen table. Open it. Walter did. Slowly. Inside, another statue. Smaller. Simpler. New. For you, Ethan said. So it won't feel empty. Walter looked at it. Then at Ethan. His eyes shined in a way Ethan had never seen before. Thank you. He placed it on the shelf, exactly where Margaret's had been. That night, before going to bed, Walter stopped in the living room, looked at the statue, and did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed, quietly, briefly, almost without thinking. Then he went asleep, because sometimes, we spend a lifetime thinking we don't have strength. And then one day, we find out we had it all along. We just needed a reason. Walter had one. Ethan. And 31 miles.